The senior test administrator, a polite but stern middle-aged woman in a practical dress, banged her gavel, bringing the room to order and to silence. "Who's next, please?" she called out. A young man in jeans, sneakers, and a Led Zeppelin t-shirt stepped forward. "Ramirez," he said, a little too loudly. He was doing a pretty good job of covering up his nervousness, but he wasn't fooling anyone. There wasn't a candidate here that wasn't eaten up to the bone with dread and hope. One of the administrators checked a list, nodded, and made a mark, presumably next to the boy's name. "And what is your familiar?" the woman asked. "A dog, ma'am," he replied. "Mr. Ramirez, you may begin," she said. The boy walked into the cockpit, a sunken platform much like a boxing ring, and stood for a moment with his head bowed, centering himself. After a few seconds, he placed his left fist into his right palm and muttered something under his breath. A small wisp of red smoke appeared in front of him, tiny at first, but within a second or two expanding to a cloud the size of a small horse. A figure took shape inside the smoke, which quickly faded away to reveal a gigantic mastiff, which was as tall at the shoulder as the boy was. It looked up at Ramirez with joy and not a little drool. "You ready?" the boy asked. The dog answered with a deep bark that echoed through the room. "Okay then," the boy said. "We've got this." He nodded to the senior administrator, who made a gesture for the doors to be opened. Two of the enforcers opened a pair of huge wooden doors bound with bronze and covered with symbols inscribed with what looked like real silver, and the mastiff bounded through them into the testing grounds beyond. The enforcers closed and barred the doors, then nodded to the administrators. "Begin," the woman said to one of her colleagues. Instantly, from beyond the door, there came a wild chorus of sounds. High-pitched shrieking, guttural roars, growls, and sounds that defied classification. Through it all, there was the fierce barking of the mastiff. As the seconds passed, some of the noise ceased, though not all of them, and with a final lion-like roar, there was a loud yelp and then silence. The cloud of smoke appeared in front of Ramirez again, and the giant dog stood there panting. The boy dropped to his knees, throwing himself around its neck, ruffling its fur and kissing its face. "Good boy," he said, with tears in his eyes, and then stood up and faced the administrators. The 5 men and women consulted each other briefly, and then the scribe marked something on his list. The senior administrator looked to the boy with a gentle smile on her face and announced, 8 in 3 minutes. A very good showing, young man." The mastiff barked once. "And dog," she amended. The young magician nodded his thanks, grinning from ear to ear, and then left the cockpit and the room to applause and congratulations, but also to the sound of profanity and weeping from the gamblers, who had just seen their life savings evaporate in front of them with a literal puff of smoke. "Who's next, please?" the head administrator called. The next candidate stepped forward, and the whole process repeated itself. She declared that her familiar was a fox, a golden-colored fox the size of, well, a fox, manifested for the girl, who sent it through the doors in its turn. This time the noise from beyond the doors lasted for several minutes, even though there was no sounds of violence. It's always perilous to read emotions into these types of sounds, but the roars and yowls sounded more and more frustrated as the minutes passed. Eventually there was another yelp, and the fox reappeared in front of his mistress, who smiled fondly at it and ruffled its ears. After a moment of consultation, the senior administrator addressed the girl. "No kills, but your familiar evaded attack for 4 full minutes. You should be very proud." The girl clearly was, and left the cockpit and the room with her head high, followed by polite applause and anguished sighs. Next came a smug-looking young man who proudly announced that his familiar was a stag. He summoned a large deer the size of an elk with viciously sharp-looking antlers, which bounded through the doors in its turn. This time there was a bellow of pain almost immediately, and the stag reappeared in front of the shocked-looking boy. 0 kills in 7 seconds, the matron announced. He did not leave with his head held high. Next came another young woman in flowing robes and dreadlocks, this one named Feather, of all things, who announced that her familiar was a snake. She manifested a 3-ton blue and white cobra that nearly filled the cockpit. It was only gone for 2 minutes, but racked up a respectable 5 kills, the matron announced. This was followed by a series of young magicians and their familiars. A tattoo-covered girl with a jaguar who killed 3 whatever they were in a minute and a half. A giant bear that filled the entire doorway in its turn and made, according to the administrators, 12 kills in 3 minutes. This was followed by a 6-foot-long mongoose who made 6 kills in a minute, a guinea pig-sized guinea pig who reappeared almost instantly, and a large African porcupine who only achieved 1 kill but lasted 10 full minutes. The last magician of the day was a tall, serious-looking young man with glasses named Oswald. "And what is your familiar?" the head administrator asked, politely, but also clearly glad to be wrapping up for the day. Oswald took a deep breath, stood tall, and looked her in the eye. "A pelican," he said. Betting hadn't started yet, so the room was silent anyway, but the expressions on the faces of the gamblers ranged from stunned to shocked to bewildered to gleeful. The senior administrator paused for a moment, then told Oswald to summon his familiar. The acid green smoke smelled faintly of sulfur this time, and roses? It dissipated to reveal, well, yeah, sure, you could call it a pelican, for lack of a better term, but this was a pelican that looked like it had been crossed with a gladiator and maybe a frog. It was 4 or 5 feet tall, crouched on all fours. It was heavily muscled and had fierce, fierce eyes. She was apparently female because as she turned to face her master, she revealed not 1 but 2 sets of magnificent breasts. She looked to her master and waited patiently. Oswald nodded his head to her and said, "Have fun." The pelican's beak was incapable of smiling, but she made a cheerful chirruping sound, then turned and leapt through the doors in 1 bound. As the doors closed, there was the expected chorus of shrieks, bellows, and roars, which quickly turned to screams of terror and pain. One by one, the voices were cut off until there was only silence, on both sides of the doors. The senior administrator turned to one of her companions and said, "Again, please." One of her colleagues nodded, and another wall of sound erupted from behind the doors. The screams came more quickly this time, as well as the growing silence, which was accompanied by a disturbing crunching sound. The senior administrator arched her eyebrows and then tilted her head in mild surprise. "One more time, if you'd be so kind, Michael," she said. There was another round of roars, bellows, shrieks, screams, crunching, and silence. The senior administrator turned to face Oswald. "You may recall your familiar," she told him, as calmly as if she was reminding a child to put on their shoes. Oswald bowed respectfully, made the appropriate hand gestures, and muttered 3 or 4 words. The cloud of green smoke reappeared, and with it, the pelican? "Have fun?" Oswald asked her, and she answered with a cheerful gurgling noise. The senior administrator stood with a gentle, almost proud smile on her face and addressed Oswald. 62 kills, she said, but we got distracted and lost track of the time.
Title: Pelican. Art Institute of Chicago. Artist: Emmanuel Fremier. Origin: France, 1891 to 1901. Medium: glazed stoneware. Dimensions: 58 by 60 by 30 centimeters.
I spend all summer looking forward to colder weather when I can wear my special hat. But looking at myself sitting here in the rain, in the woods, it occurs to me I look like nothing so much as a C-grade leprechaun. Anyway, what are you going to do? Okay, so we're going to start, as always, with some ice. Yeah, let's put it all in there. And yeah, can you juggle all that? Okay. Aha. There you go. Oh, that's a good idea. And we're going to start with 2 ounces of Blanco tequila, in this case Tanteo, which is infused with jalapenos. And great, you splashed some on your jeans. You're going to show up at your next meeting smelling like tequila. Oh, okay. Anyway. And again, as with any margarita, you're going to want some fresh squeezed lime juice. So that's maybe almost half a lime. And da 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 da. There we go. And we're going to want 1 full ounce of fresh squeezed lime juice. You know, it's not every leprechaun that brings his own limes to the woods. Okay, and most self-respecting margaritas have 3 ingredients. You got your tequila, you got your lime juice, and you've got something sweet. In this case, some cranberry syrup that I made by boiling equal amounts by weight of unsweetened cranberry juice and sugar. And there we go. And as always, a fruitless attempt to find some rhythm. And just shake that until the ice starts to break up. Okay. And I will say this about myself. I rarely go into the woods without a martini glass. And wow, that is an impressive looking margarita. Not everyone is going to be able to produce something that pink and that. Really? Okay. Anyway, take a taste of that. You know, in a world that doesn't always make sense, in a world that sometimes feels like it's spiraling out of control, taking some simple time to enjoy a cocktail and maybe a close approximation to nature, maybe that's enough.